Hello everyone, it's Charlton. So I've been researching this all morning long, or just reading several articles and watching some footage of it. It's about Robert F. Kennedy Jr., the fact that he went to go see Sirhan Sirhan, the person who assassinated his father back in 1968, Senator Bobby Kennedy, okay, just as he was running for president, or the nomination for the Democratic Party to run for president. And he had just won the California primary. I'm sure you've seen the famous clip of, and now on to Chicago. And he was well loved in the country, and he was probably going to secure the nomination for the Democratic Party and very likely be the next president of the United States. Very possible. But he met with Sirhan Sirhan, Robert Kennedy Jr., and he had 11 children. I don't know where he falls in this. He has been researching this assassination for several months. I think what caused him to start to doubt the conclusions of the court was when he saw the autopsy, and I believe he was shown that by a man named Schrade, who was actually with Kennedy that night and was shot as well. He's a union leader who was organizing support for his campaign in California and had been with him. He was actually mentioned in Robert Kennedy's speech, and they walked out together through the hotel. I forget the Ambassador Hotel, I believe it's called, in California, and they were walking through the pantry, the kitchen of the hotel, shaking hands, leaving the event, because as it was winding down when he was shot, and he was approached by Sirhan Sirhan. There's different accounts, and that's what's in question right here. And Sirhan Sirhan himself claims he doesn't remember any of it, even though he was tackled to the ground with the gun in his hand. One of the employees, the maitre d' of the hotel, grabbed his wrist and pinned it down, and Sirhan Sirhan continued to fire. So, but basically, let me back up a second. Robert Kennedy Jr., he said he got to a point after researching this for several months that he had to speak with Sirhan Sirhan. So that's what he did. And he went there yesterday, or I don't know what day he went there, but this broke literally yesterday, Saturday, over the weekend. And, went there with his wife, but his wife remained in the car, and he spent 3 hours with Sirhan Sirhan in private and didn't disclose anything that was said. But after meeting with him for 3 hours, the conclusion he came to was that they should reopen the investigation into the assassination of his father, Bobby Kennedy. Okay, so, and I think the theory is not necessarily being put forth by him, but by many others, and I think by this person Schrade, who there's some video of him, and he was shot in the forehead. Okay, and I think that comes into play in terms of what I believe, and I'll tell you what I believe at the end. The theory is that there was a second gunman, and that maybe Sirhan Sirhan was some kind of like Manchurian candidate who was more or less like hypnotized to begin firing and sort of take the blame for this. But that there was also another gunman in the crowd or in the group somewhere within the kitchen that shot the fatal blows that actually killed Bobby Kennedy. Because somewhere, basically, Sirhan Sirhan says he doesn't remember anything, doesn't remember pulling the gun out, doesn't remember shooting him or anything like that. And but in the middle of the trial, the autopsy report, it either was modified or it was presented, but it was mid-trial that showed that he had been shot from behind at point blank, like right up close range, close enough that put gunpowder on his hair and the back of his head, I believe, and also on his jacket, which would basically mean he was shot not just at point blank range, but right up on him. And according to all the witnesses, Sirhan Sirhan never got that close to him to do that. So let me continue, and there's Robert Kennedy Jr. in case so you know who we're talking about here. And he's an environmental lawyer. He takes up various causes. I've seen him on television many, many times. He's a fairly prominent public figure, and he seems like a nice fellow, even when he's on Fox and Hannity and him have polar opposite, different views on things. But still, he seems like a nice guy and all that, But, and this is a video of the night in question. It's very famous. Everyone's seen it if you follow the Kennedys at all. And of the night he was assassinated, where he, because they're all happy. He had just won the California primary, and he was going to be heading on to Chicago next. And he says, now on to Chicago. It's very famous.
I haven't mentioned, but have made all of the work completely. My thanks to all of you, and now it's on to Chicago, and let's win there. Thank you.
Kennedy has been shot. Is that possible? Is that possible? It could be. Is it possible, ladies and gentlemen? It is possible. He has not only Senator Kennedy. Oh my God! Senator Kennedy has been shot. Has fired the shot. That's it, Raper. Get it. Get the gun, Raper. Okay, now hold on to the guy. Hold on to him. Hold on to him, ladies and gentlemen. Hold him. Hold him. We don't want another Oswald. Hold him, Raper. We don't want another Oswald. Hold him, Raper. Keep people away from him. Keep people away from him.
Okay, so and there's footage of Sirhan Sirhan, I think, at a parole hearing. I'll play a little bit of that, as well as the other individual who seems to be spearheading the, wanting to reopen the investigation, Schrade, who, like I said, was there that night and got shot himself. So let's move on to that. Well, very quickly, what it says here, though Sirhan Sirhan admitted at his trial in 1969 that he shot Kennedy, so he admitted it, but he claimed from the start that he had no memory of doing so. And midway through Sirhan's trial, prosecutors provided his lawyers with an autopsy report that launched 5 decades of controversy. Kennedy was shot at point-blank range from behind, including a fatal shot near behind his ear. Sirhan, 24-year-old Palestinian immigrant, was standing in front of him. So basically, they're saying how could he, because he was shot from behind. Somebody gives a theory who wrote a book on the assassination, and I kind of agree with some of this theory, even though Schrade does not. Because Schrade was hit in the forehead right here, and Schrade was behind Kennedy, as I understand it. And so, yeah, there's a lot here. Let me stop again. You know what? I'm not going to stop. Here's Sirhan at one of his parole hearings, and this is like a little brief explanation. And to me, this tells a lot, I think, in terms of his guilt.
You remember about the shooting, if you're willing to talk about that.
And Attorney Teeter, who passed away, was trying to get a specialist, Dr. Herbert Spiegel in New York, to hypnotize me and to regress me and to do all that.
But when did you start remembering things clearly after the shooting?
I really don't remember things clearly about it, other than that.
No, I'm not asking about the shooting part. I'm asking afterwards. When did you start remembering things in reality?
In reality, all the reality of this whole thing hit me when I was on death row facing my own death.
So how many months later was that?
Oh, I would say maybe a year, 2 years.
So you don't remember a lot of things between the shooting and being on death row?
I wasn't too much worried about that, Mr. President. I was worried about saving my own butt from execution.
One of the things that we look at in your case here, and every case is different, was the crime itself. And this indeed, there is, every murder, which is predominantly what we deal with, is horrible. Certainly to the individual and to the perpetrator, that being the inmate. It certainly is horrible to the family. The individuals, you gotta listen to your gut. Individuals lose in a very dramatic, fast way a loved one that can never be replaced. But this crime went far beyond that, and we need to recognize that. Mr. Kennedy was a winning candidate in California, as you know. I'm repeating things we already know. And there was a groundswell that was a very popular groundswell for the hope that he gave some people, a lot of people. So indeed, it wasn't just the Kennedy family, which was certainly large enough and prominent enough to be of a tragic nature. There was a loss prior to that. There was indeed. You're not going to talk in the middle of my. You're going backwards here, and you need to stay on track and just listen. I'm giving you our.
Okay, the whole thing is he seems fairly, he's not dumb, and he has all his faculties when it comes to everything except the incident of the assassination. So then he becomes dumb. You know, so I don't know, dude. I'd say the charge was, I'd say, you know, it was him. Totally. So, you know, and this is just a picture of Robert Kennedy the night of, and I think this is the hotel employee there, and here is Sirhan Sirhan, his booking photo, and so forth. You know, but the reason that I think the questions came up was the fact that he was shot from behind. Sirhan Sirhan was in front of him, and that it was a point blank range, and all the witnesses claimed Sirhan Sirhan never got close enough to be at point blank range. And so basically Robert Kennedy and Schrade think that there was a second gunman that actually did the killing, you know. So, and the other thing is that witnesses have claimed that they heard as many as 13 shots, and the gun he had only had, 8 bullets in it, 8 chambers, so that it couldn't, you know. I think that could have been ricochets. It could have just been, you know, confusion inside of a closed area where there's a kitchen, you know, all sorts of things to bang off of and make echoes and stuff. But anyways, the person who's been spearheading the sort of the probe and wanting to reopen the investigation, the guy's name is Paul Schrade. Schrade is his last name, and he's a former United Auto Workers official. Schrade was one of 5 others shot and wounded at the Ambassador Hotel. And he is right here in an interview, and he talks, kind of shows us his wound real quick.
Was also shot.
There's still a dent there. The bullet went into the first layer of skull and out.
You're lucky.
Very lucky. If I'd been an inch taller, it really would have got me.
So, you know, I mean, at a minimum, he was shot by Sirhan Sirhan because, you know, as I understand it, he's behind Kennedy. Kennedy's in front of him. They're leaving, and Kennedy is shaking hands as they make their way through the pantry, through the kitchen, you know, but they're greeting people as they move out. So, but he was behind him, you know, so somebody shot him. I mean, to get here, at this point in your head, you couldn't have been, it had to be somebody in front of you. That had to have been, you know, Sirhan Sirhan. And the theory was from somebody who wrote an article, a book about this, a journalist about the Bobby Kennedy assassination, was that when one of the first things Kennedy said when he went to the ground was, "How's Paul?" So he must have seen that Paul Schrade got shot, you know, so he must have turned around and saw it, you know. I'm going to wrap this up right here, right now. And the reporter I was talking about before that wrote a book on the Bobby Kennedy assassination, his name is Dan Muldia. And there's another British author, Mel Ayton, and they both they came to the same conclusions, argue that Sirhan's gun could have reached Kennedy's back. No witnesses saw the actual shots fired in the chaos of the pantry, and Muldia noted that Kennedy almost certainly turned and tried to protect himself after the first shot, which some said was preceded by Sirhan yelling, "Kennedy, you son of a bitch." And some said indicates that multiple people reported hearing that, you know, and that would indicate that Sirhan had hatred for Kennedy and that he had forethought of doing what he was doing, you know. So, but he continues, Muldia said, "What were Kennedy's last words?" Muldia asked during an interview, "How's Paul?" So, according to Muldia's research, Kennedy said, "How's Paul?" as he fell to the ground or as he laid on the ground. And Paul was behind Kennedy, so Kennedy would have had to have been turned around in order to see that Paul Schrade had gotten shot in the forehead, and in order to say that. So Muldia theorized that Schrade fell forward into Kennedy, pinning him against the table and pushing him into the muzzle of Sirhan's gun, enabling him to fire 4 contact shots into Kennedy. You know, Robert Kennedy doesn't find these theories persuasive. It's not only that nobody saw that, Kennedy said, Kennedy Jr., the people that were closest to Sirhan, the people that disarmed him, all said he never got near to my father. But he had to have gotten close enough to shoot. Paul Schrade got shot from ahead. He got shot in the forehead. So he got shot from the front, not from the back. There had to be a minimum of 2 shooters, you know. So, and Sirhan had to have gotten close enough to make that shot. And in a very super crowded room where, you know, talking about a future presidential candidate, you know, and people are shaking his hand and everyone's, you know, bunched in there, he had to get right up on him in order to have visual on the Bobby Kennedy or Paul Schrade or whatever, you know. So, I mean, that's my thought. But Paul Schrade said, said it's baloney. Muldia's explanation said he fell backward when he was shot above his forehead. But I don't think he even had to fall into Kennedy in order to push Kennedy into Sirhan. For one thing, somebody could have pushed Sirhan into Kennedy. Now, it could have been the other way around. It could have been somebody on the other side of Sirhan that pushed him into Kennedy and pushed him closer. Or I think he was just close enough. And, the witness accounts, just in the chaos, they just didn't see it right the second before it happened, They had all their eyes on Bobby Kennedy. So, and one of the other things that this Ayton, the British author Mel Ayton, wrote, The Forgotten Terrorists, he talks about the fact that, the Sirhans were Christian Palestinians that were forced from their Jerusalem home by Israel in 1948. They were refugees. So, and Kennedy had supported the arming of Israel. So there was, reason to hate the Kennedys, basically. It says, which posits that Sirhan killed Kennedy because he supported sending military firepower to Israel, and the Sirhans were Christian Palestinians forced from their Jerusalem home by Israel, etc., in 1948. And that is the story there, man. Thanks for watching my videos. Please subscribe to my channel. Give me a like down below. I'll see you in the next video. I think it was Sirhan. I think it was Sirhan alone. Later, man.